Good afternoon and welcome back to the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. It's Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. Our next item on our agenda is our 8th Public Works item, which is Ordinance 2507. And is there a request from any commissioner to read the ordinance in full? If not, I'll read the title only. Seeing none, I'll read the title. This is the third reading for Ordinance 2507 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 16 to adopt clear and objective standards for housing in residential areas in sections 16.090, definitions, 16.237, significant natural shorelands, combining zone, SN-RCP, 16.238, prime wildlife shorelands combining zone, PW-RCP, and 16.239 Natural Resource Conservation Combining Zone, NRC-RCP, and 16.240 Residential Development Shorelands Combining Zone, RD-RCP, 16.241 Shorelands Mixed Development Combining Zone, MD-RCP, 16.242 Dredge Material Mitigation Site Combining Zone, DMS-RCP, 16.243 Beaches and Dunes Combining Zone, BD-RCP, 16.253 Stream Riparian Regulation Rural Comprehensive Metro Plan, and 16.254 Greenway Development Permit Rural Comprehensive Plan as required by Oregon Revised Statute 197A.400, updating references in other sections of Lane Code and adopting a savings and severability clause, and declaring an emergency, file number 509-PA25-05301. And that's for the title. All commissioners are required to disclose any potential or actual conflicts of interest that they have with the proposal which is before us. That means if a commissioner or one of their relatives could be financially impacted, positively or negatively, by the proposal, that should be disclosed for the record, followed by a statement that the commissioner can or cannot proceed. If there's an actual conflict, that must be disclosed on record, and then the conflicted commissioner must recuse themselves and step out of the room until the public hearing has concluded. Now I'll ask each commissioner to disclose any conflicts. Vice Chair Senega.
None.
Commissioner Buck.
None.
Commissioner Trieger.
None.
Commissioner Farr.
I have none.
And Commissioner Lovell has none. Now I'll ask for challenges to any commissioner's ability to participate in the public hearing. If anyone wishes to challenge a commissioner for a conflict of interest, the challenger should explain the basis for the challenges. The commissioner challenged will have the opportunity to respond and state whether they're able to proceed without an actual conflict of interest. Does any member of the public wish to challenge the commissioner's ability to participate in this public hearing? I see no one in Harris Hall. Is there anyone online, Jessica?
No, there is not.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I believe Council Mallory would want to give us an update as to pertaining to the public comments we received at this morning's meeting. So please, Council Mallory.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. At this morning's public meeting, you heard public comment related to this matter, Ordinance 25-07. The record for this matter closed on October 28th. Accordingly, we're going to instruct you that you should disregard those public comments that came in today as they came in after the record was closed. Thank you.
Okay, and seeing no conflicts from the public, I'll hand this presentation over to staff. And with us, we have Rachel Surslev, our senior planner, and Kevin Gilbride, our senior planner, to present the item again. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lovell, and good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Rachel Surslev, staff planner, and I have here with me Kevin Gilbride, also staff planner for this project. And this item is a third reading of Ordinance 2507. The ordinance was last before you on October 14th, at which time the board closed the public hearing but kept the record open for additional written testimony until October 28th, with an additional week for staff response. The staff response was provided via email to the board on October 31st. I'm going to give a brief overview of the issues raised in the public testimony for this item. However, many issues raised are very nuanced, and they're addressed in detail by staff in the memo provided to the board. Mainly, the testimony makes claims about this project's relationship to a Type 2 land use application for approval of a dwelling built unlawfully in the riparian setback area. The public testimony also takes issue with the lack of economic, social, environmental, and energy, or EC, analysis, and provides an argument that stream riparian regulations are already clear and objective and do not need amendments to comply with House Bill 3197. The comments discuss the Jones-McCann Type 2 application and hearings official decision, which staff considers as having no bearing on this legislative code amendment. The Jones-McCann case deals with where the Goal 5 protections for stream riparian resources apply. This code amendment does not attempt or propose to change the program for protecting certain riparian resources. The existing protection program remains in place, and all streams that are subject to Lane Code 16253 before this code amendment will remain subject to the regulations if the ordinance is adopted. The ordinance simply proposes a secondary pathway to permitting development that may be located adjacent to an already identified protected riparian area, as is designated by the Rural Comprehensive Plan. The testimony also suggests that staff should have conducted an economic, social, environmental, and energy analysis, or an EC analysis, to make amendments to the stream riparian regulations. Staff has been consulting with legal counsel on the question of needing an EC analysis since the start of this project. The conclusion throughout the process has been that such an analysis is not required because the proposed amendments do not substantially alter the Goal 5 program that protects riparian resources. The proposed amendments for protecting riparian vegetation are substantially similar to the existing provisions of Lane Code 16253, if not more protective. This determination is supported by case law, as is explained in detail in a memo from Assistant County Counsel Ann Davies, which was provided with the staff memo that was provided to you all on October 31st. And lastly, the testimony received raised numerous very specific issues with the proposed clear and objective pathway for vegetation removal in the riparian area. The main concern generally is that no changes were needed to this section of code because it's already clear and objective. However, staff believes that there are parts of the riparian code that are not clear and objective and required amendments to create such an option for housing. And staff maintains this position that the proposed amendments to the stream riparian regulations are needed to comply with House Bill 3197. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to chat about a few things as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel, and good afternoon, commissioners. Normally I talk for quite a while when I present, but I'll try not to talk for as long. I wanted to start with the best thing about being staff for a project like this is that it helps us learn to be better communicators. We're always trying to be better. And in that vein, I would like to state a couple primary concepts about this ordinance in the clearest way possible. First, what is not changing? The existing provisions, criteria, and allowances within each of the sections proposed for amendment through this ordinance will remain unchanged after its adoption. It is policy neutral. No one is losing an existing allowance in any of the overlay sections because none of the existing allowances are being amended. Second, what is changing? The amended code adds a new separate set of criteria and provisions for the development of housing in areas zoned for rural residential use. That's it. I also,
Again, I'm sorry. Just
from the beginning.
no, just that last sentence.
Second, what is changing? The amended code adds a new separate set of criteria and provisions for the development of housing in areas zoned for rural residential use.
A new separate thing.
I also wanted to address some confusion surrounding the new provisions for the development of housing in the riparian code specifically. We've received comments throughout this process outlining a perception that the new clear and objective provisions may permit a property owner to remove more vegetation within the riparian setback area than is currently allowed under the existing provisions. And that the perceived increased allowance requires that we, the county, perform an easy analysis. I believe that this misunderstanding may be down to some of the wording in the original September 30th, 2025 ACM to the board and Table 1 included in that ACM. Table 1 provides 3 columns that describe the total vegetation removal in square feet for both the existing code and the clear and objective code. Column 1 outlines the existing vegetation removal provisions in square feet, which are reflected in the amended code in Lane Code 16253 sub 5 sub B. The second column describes the allowable linear distance of removal from the center of a dwelling permitted under the new clear and objective provisions of sub 5 sub A. And the third column describes the total vegetation removal allowance under the new clear and objective provisions as the area of a circle with a radius matching the linear distance of removal per the provisions of 5A. In each of the rows the square foot area described exceeds that of the original code. I believe the third column is what is causing confusion. A reader could look at this table and conclude that the new clear and objective standards allow for a greater amount of vegetation removal than the existing code, and indeed that appears to have been the case based on public comment received throughout this process. And based on the table, they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. However, the total allowances described by the table are impossible to reach, and the table is not being codified through this process. The allowances listed are the total area of circles with radii matching the maximum distance vegetation removal from the center of a proposed dwelling. The ACM states that it is unlikely that these maximum allowances will be achieved, but that's false. It's actually impossible under the clear and objective provisions of 5A to exceed the maximum allowable vegetation removal as allowed by 5B. Under the clear and objective provisions, no portion of a dwelling can ever be located within the riparian setback area. As such, only a portion of the setback measured from the center of a proposed dwelling can actually fall within the riparian setback area, meaning only a portion of the total allowed vegetation outlined in that table can ever be achieved. For example, per the provisions of sub 4, a dwelling cannot be located within the riparian setback area. So even if a property owner built a dwelling where the center of the dwelling somehow fell directly on the edge of the riparian setback area, which is actually impossible under building code regulations for minimum room sizes, only half of the total vegetation removal described in Table 1 could be achieved for clear and objective standards. In each case, whether a property has 200 feet or less, 200 to 400 feet, or more than 400 feet of frontage, half the removal area is less than the base existing allowances of the non-clear and objective code provisions. As such, the new provisions do not exceed the old allowances that have already been approved. That concludes what I have to say for now, but I'm going to pass it back to Rachel.
Thank you, Kevin. So just to wrap up, that concludes staff's presentation for today, and we are recommending that the board adopt the ordinance as presented, and we're happy to take any questions that will surely arise. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, staff. Appreciate that presentation. Thank you, Kevin, for being clearer and more objective.
We're trying.
Appreciate that very much. To the board, is there any questions that the board has for staff? Vice Chair, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll kind of start. Thank you, I appreciate it. I will say that I do have concerns about moving this forward at this point. So we've had very limited input from interested parties. I mean, a couple of emails back and forth and a little bit of public comment. And then just this morning, we struck 3 minutes of their public comment that they got. So in the 975 pages here, do we have a report on, because you said we had a meeting with some of the local land use attorneys. Do we have a report about that? Like what was talked about, what the discussions were, what their concerns were, how we could work those out between the two of us?
I do, thank you, Vice Chair. I do believe we have a write-up from LCOG. At that point, LCOG was facilitating that stakeholder outreach, and if my memory serves, we may have some follow-up report from them. I don't have that in the record at this point, but it could certainly be provided to you.
Okay, because we've been as straightforward as we can that we would like to see things move forward, not being more stringent than we have to be. And you know, Kevin, last time you were asked that, and you said, well, by nature, this will be more strict than it is currently. Is there any way of getting around that so we don't have to be more strict in this case?
I think we did the best we could within the constraints that we were facing. For each of the overlay zones that we modified, there's an overarching statewide planning goal that provides the regulations and rules limiting and providing guidance for counties on how they should protect these resources. And following those rules while also creating clear and objective standards, it just intrinsically will result in standards that are more strict for some people. I don't think that the standards resulted in more strict regulations for every property owner. And in many cases, they will make development simpler for property owners. But to make them less stringent than we did falls into a weird area where we might violate the statewide planning goals and the rules that we are meant to protect, support and protect.
Okay. Well, I want to go back to last week. Commissioner Buck and I spent 2 days at a rural housing incubator that Mr. Adams just walked in and put on. It was great, but I think everybody there, if they heard a new separate set of code for rural residential, would be on the verge of infuriated with the amount of work that it takes to get these houses done currently, and what that's doing to the cost of housing currently. The overwhelming answer to that is we don't need a new separate code. Is there any way to get away from more code, more restrictions? Thanks, Chair.
Oh, Councilor Ann, please.
Comment that is, you have to hold it. It's semantics. It's rigid versus more strict. So the clear and objective requirements, I think when Kevin was saying they're more strict, perhaps he meant more rigid. So the clear and objective standards, by their very nature, are more rigid. They're not necessarily more or less protective of the resource. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, they're commensurate is the term we would use.
Yeah, so when the comment was that the last time we met, Kevin said they're more strict. I think when he said that the clear and objective requirements are more strict, I think his intention was to say they're more rigid, meaning the non-clear and objective ones, by their very nature, allow for more discretion by the decision maker. The clear and objective requirements allow less discretion by the decision maker, and that's intentional because that gives the applicant a really good idea of what they're going to get at the end of the process. So when we're talking about substantive protections of the resource, what staff really tried to do in their process was to find protections that were very similar to what you would find in the non-clear and objective path.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Anyone else? Commissioner Farr.
I'm trying to quantify this as much as possible because we have you just said that we might violate statewide planning rules if we don't move forward with we might. And so it seems like there's a certain amount of, in my mind, there's a certain amount of unclarity regarding whether or not this meets some of the issues that are very important to me. So I'll ask you a question. Can we solve the housing problem in rural Lane County? We all know we have a housing problem, not just in Lane County, but can we solve it in rural Lane County? That's a softball. Of course we can't solve it in rural Lane County. But can we stop making it more difficult in Lane County? Can we stop making it worse in Lane County to build housing? And that's what I'm trying to drive toward, is how can we do the best job that we possibly can, knowing that we'll never solve housing with the few houses that we allow in rural Lane County. How can we do the best job we can of not making it more difficult, more expensive, more time-consuming, and in many cases, thereby impossible to build houses in rural Lane County? So that's what I'm struggling with right now, and I don't know that I'm convinced at this point in time that passing this ordinance today meets that requirement that I have, that we're not making it more difficult to provide housing and beds and front doors in Lane County. That's a big question, and I don't know that you can answer it in the 4 hours we have left. So,
if I may, Commissioner, I'll take a shot at it.
sure.
Right now, we have a set of land use regulations that, as you all know, are very complex and difficult for the public. They're frustrated with them. The legislature directed local jurisdictions to create a clear and objective path to make it easier for folks to build housing. When this is said and done, if the board were to adopt it in its current form, you would have those existing regulations as they are, complicated, complex. And you would also have a separate path that the public could take that's clear and objective. Staff aren't making the existing codes more strict. They're simply providing another path that is clear and objective. So,
This is clear, yes.
yeah, this is more clear, more objective. So,
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that is clear to me.
okay. So I think the concern maybe that we're hearing is that what staff are proposing is more restrictive somehow. And I think Kevin's clarified that it's not, and that maybe it could allow more. And we have we're tasked with getting these rules adopted in a certain timeline. And staff are trying to work through that process to allow more opportunities for the public. This venue, this is supposed to be sort of a policy neutral proposal from staff, which we believe it is. This isn't the venue, in my opinion, to crack open the code, get under the hood, and do all of these things that I'm sure a lot of people would like to see done. We're trying to just provide one option to the public, a clear and objective option that's quick, understanding that there's probably lots of work we can do with our code, and we've been continuing to do that through the Code Modernization Project. I don't know that this is the right opportunity to get in there and try to make all those tweaks, because this is a fairly straightforward proposal. And I know there's been some comment about it being potentially appealed. I mean, frankly, I'm scratching my head about what grounds it could be appealed under. We're simply trying to implement state law and make things more clear and objective in a policy neutral way.
Thanks, Keir. And you've explained that. That's all very clear to me, but the clear and objective standards that we are proposing, while clear and objective does not necessarily mean less restrictive, and it certainly doesn't mean, as Councilor Davis says, it means it's very rigid. And what I'm not convinced at this point is what we're proposing. The clear and objective standards are an asset to people being able to develop housing legally. So I'm not saying that it's not, but as with some of the language that I'm hearing, we might violate state law. This may be more rigid, different things. I don't think that because of this, I'm not very clear that we are doing the very best job that we possibly can in crafting the clear and objective standards that are being put forward. While they are clear and objective, most certainly, I'm not sure that we're doing the best job that we can at making it less difficult to develop housing in rural Lane County. So for myself, this leans me toward having greater discussion with stakeholders who do have varied opinions regarding the nature of the clear and objective standards that are being proposed. And Mr. Gilbride, I'm not negating the work that's been done on this by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not saying that you're not putting your very best foot forward to make it happen. What I'm asking is, what is the possibility of us stepping back a little bit, inviting stakeholders to provide a back and forth dialogue in a venue that is accessible to people who are willing to function as one of the stakeholders, whether it be whomever it may be, whatever their ideas are regarding how the clear and objective standards could be written to make it more smooth for people who are trying to develop housing. So, you're both nodding, so I think you have an answer.
Okay. We're happy to engage with stakeholders more if that's the direction of the board. I do just want to clarify that staff has worked closely with the public, and the regulations that are proposed today were published a month before the Planning Commission meeting back in July, I believe. And some of the consultants, attorneys you've heard from did not participate in the Planning Commission process. So we have opened the door to folks to try to provide feedback. It's come very late in the process. So I just want the board to be aware of that, but we're happy to do more engagement.
And thanks for that. And during my many years of service in the city council, state legislature, even the school board, and now the county commission, people never have enough time. And they always say, well, I didn't get to give my input on that. But my point on this is that we're looking at some pretty important decisions. And while it is trying to tidy things up, so to speak, to comply with state requirements, this is an opportunity for us to make it easier for people to wade through what we already know is a very complex situation. Clear and objective standards do reduce, while rigid, they reduce the complexity, most certainly. Can we do a better job in making it easier for people to develop with the clear and objective standards that we put forward in this ordinance when we do finally pass it?
Chair, just if I could, what I'm going to be looking for is for commissioners to be very specific about the areas in which you would like to see a change from what is being proposed. So hear the feedback that you would like additional engagement. We can do additional engagement, certainly something, we've done it, we can do more engagement, but what we really need is direction from the policy body about the specific changes that you would like to see from what is being proposed today. So I'll be seeking that before we conclude the item.
And I will say this, Ms. Mokryski, that I'm not an expert on this. This is very complex. This is not the area that I've studied. This is not the area that I have laid down my expertise, and I don't spend 8, 10, 12, 15 hours a day doing this. It's not my job. I can't be very specific because I simply don't have the expertise to be very specific. What I hope for is a dialogue between people who really know how to develop or how they would like to develop, and the people who work for the government who understand the regulations, how we can get together. If you're counting on me to be very specific, Steve, I'm sorry, man, I don't have that expertise. I need to hear from people who do have the expertise even more.
Right, and I would just say, you have the expertise here within the staff that works for you. Feedback from stakeholders, absolutely critical. We've received that, we can do more, but ultimately the decision rests with the commissioners. Right? Not with staff and not with the stakeholders. You're the representatives of the people that have to make that decision. So the direction at the end of the day, and I just want to make sure that staff isn't put in the position of, bring a rock, a different rock sort of thing. So we can have that engagement, get that feedback, but at the end of the day, the board is going to need to provide the direction.
Yeah. And, the statement you said, bring a rock, bring a different rock. I think that people trying to develop have had that frustration quite often is, no, that's not the right rock, bring a different rock. So,
which is the purpose of the clear and objective standards.
Absolutely, and that is why it's important that we get the clear and objective standards to a point where they're the best they can possibly be to not inhibit development of housing stock in Lane County.
And so just to that point, it's helpful to know where the places and what's being proposed that housing development is being inhibited. I think that's what I'm trying to get to is hear the overall sort of platitudes on the issue, but it's helpful to get specific about the areas that you would like to see particular
And using the term platitude doesn't help. It's not platitudes that I'm involved in here. This is one opportunity, one moment in time. Once we pass this ordinance, there is not another moment in time to make this ordinance better. So can we take a little bit more time and maybe come back with the exact same ordinance, not a different rock, the same rock exactly, but to appease me, platitudes, if you will, that this is the best that we can do. Because we are not, by any stretch of the imagination, nobody in this room can say we are doing the best we can do to not get in the way of developing housing. The state of Oregon is not a very easy place to do that. And municipalities and counties tend to pass ordinances and pass regulations and rules that exceed the requirements of the state, as complex as state government is, and complex as land use laws are in Oregon since Senate Bill 100 and whatever evolution has happened since then. It's difficult to develop housing, and while we're not going to solve the problem of housing in Lane County, I would like to be certain, absolutely crystal certain, that we're not inhibiting it.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to offer maybe a potential solution, if it works for folks. If you had mentioned that perhaps we can do more public engagement. So, and we are also on a timeline, a time crunch, right, where we've got some pressure, given the requirements from the state. Could you propose in the next 2 to 4 weeks, let's say, a way in which you could do a public engagement event or meeting, and then be able to have another opportunity for people to give feedback, and then return here with the ordinance and whatever feedback you get from that particular meeting or event? Would that be a potential solution?
You know, Commissioner, that's a step in the right direction. You know, my inclination is to ask for 6 more months. However, what you're suggesting is a period of time where more information could be put on the table to help satisfy the questions that it's not all about me by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have questions regarding it. And once we pass this ordinance, once again, it's going to be difficult / impossible to go back and change it. So I think that that potentially could solve the issue. Now, at the end of that public engagement, I may still come back and say, boy, I really I need more information on it. And I'm only one of 5 commissioners, so you're not doing everything to please me. But I truly wish that I could be satisfied that we're doing the best that we can with this ordinance. At this moment in time, sitting here, I'm not satisfied.
I mean, I'm supportive of the ordinance as written. I understand we're well beyond the time clock set by this, you know, that this code changes to be compliant with a state law that said we are to have this code in place by sometime in July was when it was. And so we're already behind on that. I am always appreciative of Commissioner Farr's commitment to housing, but I think there is some very specific parts of this that there may be some folks who aren't happy about. Our code is not the place to relitigate a state law. That law was passed, and now we have to be compliant. And I think the RR2 part is probably not the part that is most impacted. That there are other lands that some folks may be concerned about, either currently or in the future, that they may want to develop in a way that this may make that harder. And I think that's okay too, because we, as much of an obligation and commitment as we have to doing everything we can to make the development of housing possible, we also have an obligation to protect resource and preserve the conditions of certain parts of our environment. And I think this code amendment satisfies that. So I'm happy with it. I very much appreciate the administrator asking for specific changes. And I heard Commissioner Farr both say this isn't his area of expertise, so he doesn't know. So I'm wondering how you would know if what comes back is the right thing. So I appreciate the concern, but I also share the concern that we can't ever get it right unless and until some very specific thing is met that you haven't named. So I just don't know how we can ever get there. So I'm just not clear what waiting does. And I also want to appreciate Commissioner Buck for offering sort of a split the difference of giving one more opportunity for folks who maybe feel they haven't had a chance to weigh in, to share feedback with staff and see if there's any adjustments they can make. That seems reasonable, but we don't have 6 months. We're already quite a bit behind the deadline that was set for us to have these code amendments in place. So I'm supportive of moving forward. I'm supportive of Commissioner Buck's recommendation if we're not prepared to move forward today.
Unless you want your first round.
Yeah, let me have my first round just for a second, because by the time I get to have comments, of course, we've ground through all kinds of things, and whatever I was going to talk about is probably infantile, but there's a couple things that I want to just get really clear in my mind and for the public. You said that there is two paths the rural residential homeowner can choose. So there's this clear and objective path, and there's the old path. Now, am I clear to understand that both of those paths are still going to be as options if I walk into the counter and say I want to do that? How do I know which one to pick is my first question. And if this is clear and objective, why is there a subjective pathway forward too? Why is the need for both? That's what's kind of confusing to me right now. Can you help explain that a little bit?
Okay.
Go ahead, Gare.
I think that there are two options because it provides more options for the public. There are things that you can do under the current discretionary path that you would not be able to do under the clear and objective path. And for some folks, it might make sense. They want to do this special thing. They want to have their house just in this specific location. They really care about that. Well, then they take the discretionary path, and it's more complicated. But if they don't, it's not that big of a deal, and they can live with maybe one or two extra things being set back a little bit further, something like that, then they would choose the clear and objective path, and they'd get a decision a lot quicker and with a lot more assurance and less money. So that it's really providing the public more options.
And when they come to the counter, our customer service is giving them enough information to know where they can pick that path. I'm assuming that, of course, right? Yeah.
That's what our staff does every day is we walk through the options with folks.
Right. And the thing also too, if we're concerned with what Commissioner Farr is concerned with, and I am too, I'd like to see things getting easier built. And heaven knows in the last 15 years of the cost and the complexity of building has become monumental for developers and even people that want to do their own dream houses. But I'm curious, just as a numbers perspective, how many properties are we actually talking about here in the county that either would be positively or negatively affected by some of the concerns Commissioner Farr puts out? I know that we were talking about floodway properties at one point, and there was like 2,500 of them, if I recall that number. But are we looking at 12,500? That number somehow rings a bell that we've talked about before. Is that even close to being accurate?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Maybe Kevin can look it up really quick. I think it's around 8,000 properties that we noticed before the Planning Commission hearing. And we noticed properties that are zoned rural residential because those are the only ones that will be affected by this amendment. And then we took rural residential properties that were overlaid with the specific overlays that we're amending. And those are the people that we think could possibly be affected by this amendment. It's probably a lot less than who we noticed because we tend to over-notice to make sure people know about things. And I think, did you pull up the specific number?
Yeah, the specific number of properties affected by this ordinance is about 7,500 properties. But not all of those properties are affected by every aspect of the ordinance. Not every property has every single one of these overlay zones. And I would doubt there is one that has all of them. And the total acreage that we gathered was 31,806 acres, but not all of those acreages are fully covered by every one of these overlays.
And I would assume of those 7,500 available properties, a lot of those may have structures on them already, and we're not talking about building new housing as such, yeah.
And that was the majority of the input that we've received from the public is from people that already have houses.
Right. I'm just trying to develop a collective impact of one way or the other, how many people it's going to affect negatively or positively. That's kind of my line of questioning. So I'll stop there just for a second. Vice Chair, go ahead.
Yes. So Ms. Davies kind of went through it, and I was wondering if we could get some clarification. If we have a path currently, what is, and I don't want to say rush, but I know it's a lot of work for you guys to come in front of us. But what is the push to get this done so quick right now? What is the repercussion, the consequences?
So this came up last time, and we had a little bit of a discussion about it. So the timeline for getting this done was July. So when a statute comes into effect, they expect the changes to be made. If they're not changed, if the code is not changed within that time frame, then basically the requirement that these things be clear and objective applies directly to the county. So if we have a code provision that's not clear and objective, and someone came in and said, those are not clear and objective, you can't apply any of those to us, then the county is in the position of basically not having protective regulations in place, because you're not allowed to impose the non-clear and objective criteria. So that's part of what the rush is to get this done, is so that we know what we're dealing with.
Gotcha. But there's no fee that could come down on us from the state or
I don't
or anything.
I don't think so.
It's kind of a maybe.
There's
Something
legal
might happen.
liability, there's exposure.
Yeah, it's more of a liability litigation issue than a fine from DLCD or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. We also have context for what can happen in other counties where clear and objective standards haven't been adopted, and then the existing standards are challenged by an appellant or an applicant. And that was in Washington County, and their standards were challenged for not being clear and objective. They went up to LUBA. LUBA said they're not clear and objective, and then later came along from LCDC and the Department of Land Conservation and Development a stay on development within the overlays that were deemed not clear and objective. And then they adopted a new code that they thought was clear and objective, and it was also deemed not clear and objective, and they were told they needed to do a full Goal 5 inventory analysis, and it became a multi-year process where they no longer had the ability to develop in these areas. And so, like, there's broader context there, and that's why there's a looming deadline over our heads as to why we need to bring our code into compliance with House Bill 3197 in the shortest time period possible.
Gotcha. Sorry, I missed what county was that?
Washington.
Oh, in Washington County. Yeah. So how long have we had to get to this point right now? I mean, when was this implemented again? I think you said, Rachel.
When was House Bill 3197 adopted?
Yeah.
We've got it in here.
Race is on. 2003 session? 2003 session, I think.
It's July 31st, 2023. Oregon governor signed House Bill 3197.
And became operative July 1,
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Please.
we've been working on this for over a year, and now we're here trying to get it going.
Right. Okay. So, Kier, you mentioned earlier that you would be more than willing to speak with stakeholders. What would that look like in your mind? If you make that work?
Well, to be frank, I think we're only going to hear from a couple of stakeholders at this point. So I think it's pretty clear who we'll be talking to. And, I think there's a lot of different ways we could do it. If we want to continue to keep this thing moving, I mean, the simplest way is the board could just reopen the record and allow them to provide us comments directly. And then we could respond to those and try to integrate in what they want. We could try to hold a big community event and see if people show up. But again, I think we're going to be talking to a couple of attorneys is really what's going on. So my recommendation would be to open up the record and allow them to, again, respond, say their piece, reiterate their thoughts, and we could try to integrate those and bring them back and synthesize to the board what they've recommended and what we have here, and try to make that work.
Thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Trigger. I thought you had one more question. My mistake. Commissioner Farr, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, it's a good discussion, and, Commissioner Trigger is absolutely correct that there's no guarantee that I'm going to be satisfied at the end of this that I fully understand, because I don't think anyone in this room fully understands Oregon State land use laws, because as you say, Keir, they are very complex. But right now, if we pass it, once we pass this ordinance, I'm not saying if, I'll say when we pass this ordinance, we'll have two routes. Will be the established clear and objective standards from the ordinance, and the existent route that currently is in place, which, Keir, you said is more complex. Now, by more complex, that means to me more time-consuming, more expensive, and more onerous for the property owner to develop a new house. So right now, the reason people wouldn't choose, once we pass this ordinance, the reason people would not choose the existent process is because it's more expensive, it's more time-consuming, potentially has dead ends in it. Whereas the clear and objective standards allows them a rigid set of standards that they can go by, that we can't say, no, that's not right, because it's clear. We can look up the definition of clear, we can look up the definition of objective, and that's what we all love, isn't it? We love things to be clear and objective. So you don't want to guess the price of gas when you go up to the pump. You want it to be clear and objective. So I love it. I love the thought that we are moving toward clear and objective standards. But what I'm hoping to achieve is that we are not just putting a set of clear and objective standards out that work for us, that we're putting out a set of clear and objective standards that work for the people who want to develop properties, that make it better, easier, faster, less expensive to develop properties into housing in Lane County, inside of law. Don't want to break the law, don't want to reduce our commitment to protecting our natural resources. We don't want to reduce our requirement to adhere to goals, but we want to do everything that we can do inside of the law to allow people the easiest, clearest, most objective path to building a house less expensively. And that's what I'd like to achieve. So if we do move this forward to what I would hope would be more of a dialogue than you send a letter, we'll respond to you and we get the last word. And in that kind of a scenario, somebody gets the last word, and then the person said, well, yeah, you missed this part of what I said. So, more of a dialogue in person is what I would like to see. Now, whether or not we can do that, whether or not you have the capacity, or whether or not we as a county have a mechanism to do that, once again, that would be the best way to handle this. And at the end of it, what I'd like to achieve is the fact that we are passing an ordinance with clear and objective standards that make it easier for people to develop and build houses. Easier, less expensive, and faster to develop and build houses inside of the law.
Any other comments? If not, before us is two objectives or two motions we can make. We can either move to approve this order 2507 as presented, or Council Mallory could be a little informative here and let us know what our motion would be if we wanted to go a different direction and reopen the public record.
Yes, Chair, I think you have a couple of options. You could move to reopen the record and then set a time for a fourth hearing and deliberation. And with that, I'd recommend either setting a date to close the record again or to determine whether you want to keep the record open until final deliberation or till a final decision is reached. So depending on which way you want to go, I can help craft that.
Vice Chair.
So if the record was opened, would that allow for the comment type section that both Keir and Commissioner Farr have spoken about?
Yes.
That one? Okay.
It's a bit different to the motion that I'd written, but I'm fine with your crafting of a motion.
I'm also happy to defer to you, Commissioner. We want to make sure we have, we're clear about what we're doing with the record, when we're coming back, and if we're going to keep the record open or close.
Well, if I may, Chair, what I had in my mind to lean toward was more of a working committee consisting of LMD staff and stakeholders, whatever the position the stakeholders may have, that could actually work together rather than a back and forth, a written back and forth, which is what opening the record typically would be. Now, if that's not something that we have the capacity for, capability for, or time for, then I will understand. But that'd be what I'd be, in my mind, that's what I saw, was an open discussion back and forth where there's no last word, there's no written last word, and nobody can say anything after this final period on this final sentence.
I think the only issue with that, Commissioner, is that this is dependent upon third parties who aren't here. And so in terms of scheduling and just, if somebody can't make the day, then they feel excluded or something like that. So I think, given that, I think perhaps just giving that guidance to staff as a part of reopening the record, if that's what you choose to do, would be my recommendation.
I trust your recommendation. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
County Administrator Mulcarsky, did you have a word that you were struggling with? Look, I'm sorry.
I'm just waiting for,
Waiting for the action to
once you
happen.
make that motion, then the direction motion.
Okay, good. Commissioner Buck, you had a question?
No. I have a question.
Commissioner Trigger.
It seems to me there are specific people that Commissioner Farr is wanting to have a chance to get more say, but it's my understanding those folks were invited, the original process, we did have an open public input process, and folks were invited and opted not to participate.
There was a planning commission meeting, and my understanding is the attorneys that spoke this morning were not present in that. And then we did meet specifically with Mr. Reeder and Mr. Close.
Correct.
So we did meet with them individually as well.
So they have had an opportunity to give input. They just don't like where we've arrived, is my sense. And so what are we seeking by reopening the record? An opportunity for them to state their dissatisfaction? I'm just trying to understand what we're actually going to
Let's see.
get to in the future where we're not.
The memo that we received this last week,
The staff response to the concerns, is that what you're talking about?
it was a staff response to the concerns that seemed to be very final in terms, dismissal is what it feels like to me, of the suggestions, the recommendations that were made by, looks like Reeder and, Reeder is the one that I'm seeing right here, and Close. But it seems like more of a dismissal rather than a dialogue.
Can I respond to that? I would love to respond to that.
Yeah.
Our staff's assessment of the testimony that was provided, nowhere in the testimony has anyone taken the clear and objective language and indicated to staff how they don't agree with the specific standard that we've identified. The public testimony seems more, it's a general dissatisfaction or disagreement with the staff's approach to the project. And so I guess my concern regarding this discussion is that we may be wanting specific feedback that's specific to the clear and objective standards, but we haven't received that yet. And I would be unsure that we will receive it if we continue to open this record.
Then by offering a small window to receive that very specific information that you have not yet received in all of these pages and pages and pages that you say you've not received that yet, one more chance to receive that very specific information from the people who are, the stakeholders who are in disagreement one way or another. Then after that, then they've had their chance to give the very specific feedback, as have I, and then we're ready to move forward with the ordinance.
Commissioner Buck.
Since we have our board scheduler here in the audience, would it be possible just to move this to our next meeting and have 2 weeks for particular feedback and reevaluate then? I mean, they're already prepared with their feedback, I would think. They've seen the information, so they should be able to enter that with us within these next 2 weeks.
Yeah, just to respond to that, we've identified December 2nd as a possible fourth reading. So that would give, if the board wanted to reopen the record and identify an open record period, there would be enough time for stakeholders to be able to provide more comment and for staff to respond to it, if that's what the board desires.
It looks like December 2nd would be a better choice, being the meeting we have 2 weeks from today is also a short meeting due to the AOC conference. So to squeeze that in and have dialogue like this may be a little too soon. So the December 2nd meeting, I think, works better. So given that, we still have 2 motions ahead of us. If we want to go different directions, we can either accept as presented or draft a motion to where we can reopen the public record, receive more input from stakeholders, and revisit this on a fourth reading December 2nd at, I would assume, a 1:30 time certain. So we're after?
Yes, Chair.
So I'm looking for a motion. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Actually, I'm looking to Ms. Beebe, Council Beebe. Do you have a motion that would cover that?
I can present one. I would just like a little bit of clarity about if we're going to close the record again or if we are going to leave the record open upon reopening and just have it close when the deliberations have concluded.
My desire would be to have it reopened with the provision, as you called it, instruction to staff to have a dialogue, what I called a committee meeting between staff and the stakeholders. It puts a great deal of onus upon stakeholders to attend that meeting.
And then would you want the record open to the end or a certain date, Commissioner Farr?
The December 2nd is 28 days away. What would be your recommendation on that?
I would recommend that we just keep it open until the fourth reading and a decision is made.
Thank you. Then, as you stated, if you can craft a motion surrounding that, then that would satisfy the questions that I have. And to the staff, it would help me to move more closely to understanding that we are doing the very best job that we can, which we all want to do. I know we all want to do that. We all want to make it easier for people to build houses. We all do, inside of the law, so.
Here.
Chair Lovell, if I could just ask for some clarity around the stakeholders, can we clarify that that's the parties of record who've participated in the proceedings this far? That's who would get notice of this meeting that we would have?
That seems reasonable to me, yes.
Okay. Right.
That you're not throwing it out, just broadcasting anybody else, people who have not necessarily been a part of the discussion to date. So, thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
So I would recommend a motion to reopen the record on ordinance number 25-07 to allow further communication with current stakeholders who have been involved to date to obtain further input, and to set a time for a fourth reading to deliberate and for possible action to December 2nd at 1:30 p.m.
Chair, I'd make the motion at verbatim as stated by Council Beebe.
Okay, thank you. Any second?
Second.
Motion's been stated by Council Beebe, and if you wish to repeat that, go ahead, and then we'll have a second by the Vice Chair. So go ahead and repeat that, please, for the record.
Verbatim? I'll try my best. Motion to reopen the record on ordinance number 25-07 to allow for further communications with the stakeholders that have been involved to date in this process, to allow time for further input, and motion to set time for a fourth reading on ordinance 25-07 to deliberate and for possible action to December 2nd at 1:30 p.m.
Second. Perfect.
1:30 p.m. Time certain. Okay, got it. All right, and the motion's been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Vice Chair Senega. Any discussion to the motion? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
I'll just say that I'm likely to vote no, not necessarily because I oppose it in general. It's just that I don't necessarily need the extra time to deliberate, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Farr.
I'd just like to say thank you to Commissioner Buck for proposing this, though you may not be supporting it, because I do need the extra time, so thank you.
All right. This is a roll call vote, so Mr. Murkowski, if you do the honors, please, sir.
We're not adopting an ordinance.
More direction.
Not yet.
Well, the script says right here it's a roll call vote, so I will retract that, and I'll call for the vote on ordinance 2507. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oops,
Clarification, we're not voting on the ordinance, we're voting on the motion
on the
as
motion that was
by
stated,
Council
yes.
Beebe.
Yes, on the motion that was stated, seconded by Commissioner Senega. I'll call for the vote. All those signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, our item 9 is the emergency management report, a seasonal update of our wildfire closeout and winter weather briefing. And the ever so patient Tiffany Brown, our emergency manager, is here at the desk. Tiffany, it's good to see you. You look refreshed and not like we had a haggard wildfire season this year, so we're fortunate and blessed for that. Thank you. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Lovell, Vice Chair, Commissioners. I'm pleased to be before you today, and what moving forward will be the semi-annual presentation by Emergency Management. In my last meeting with the County Administrator, we set up a battle rhythm for twice yearly to sort of out with the old, in with the new, and today it is the end of wildfire season and the beginning of our winter season. In the spring, we'll do it all again in reverse. Little overview of what we're going to talk about today. We'll close out the wildfire season for 2025, give you a little data and information about what that looked like, the associated activities that occurred during the season, and then just some lessons in motion afterwards, things that we either learned during the season or that we're planning to cinch up for next. Winter weather overview, we'll look at our seasonal outlook, what we're expecting to see this fall and into the winter, some lessons we've applied from other events, specifically the ice storm in some cases, and then just some activities that we're seeing across agencies in preparation for the winter weather. So here's a snapshot of our 2025 wildfire season. It started on June 9th or June 19th, right? Ban burns, the Oregon Department of Forestry. So it started in June, and by the time it was over, we'd burned over 33,000 acres this year. The makeup looked a lot different than last year in terms of just acreage burned, the number of fires and the season, but really the major events boiled down to about 3 fires. The Emigrant, which we're familiar with, the biggest, the bulk of that acreage. Foley Ridge, which occurred up the Mackenzie just towards the last part of the season. And then Sugarloaf, which was 53 acres, but it came the closest of all of our events to infringing on a community, which was Oak Ridge. In addition to those 3 fires, we had 20 more. Here and there from May to as recently as October. And our Fire Defense Board Chief Wallace, who's also the Mohawk Marcola Chief, really attributes that to the quick and responsive action of our local fire agencies, that we're able to catch things before they got bigger and really minimize our fire season and the impacts that we saw. So in terms of activities, we, Emergency Management, Public Works, Public Health, the Sheriff's Office, those of us who are chiefly involved, especially in those early moments of events. Public Health didn't see a lot of action. Air quality was pretty good this year. the heat stayed at a relatively tolerable, and so public health ended up having a pretty quiet season with regard to fire season. Also, Public Works, I checked in with them today just to confirm, because we had relatively less activity. Public Works didn't see as much as they tend to. Search and rescue and dispatch are really where we saw the most action. We had a few evacuation levels, level 3 a couple of times, all short-lived. We didn't lose structures. We didn't stand up shelters, but it was the folks in our sheriff's office dispatching, sending out those alerts, and facilitating evacuations in those early stages. Cooperators are a big part of our ongoing hazard season, regardless of what that is. We saw cooperators on a couple of fronts. We participated in the community meetings in the communities where the fires were happening. We didn't, because activities were less so, we didn't stand up the regular weekly cooperators call, or last summer we hosted that call sometimes 3 days a week. Nothing rose to the level of warranting that this year. We switched into something different that was sort of a halfway point, and that is that every Friday we sent a weekly email to the cooperators, letting them know what was going on, who was on scene, where the areas of concern were, and just any general information about air quality and links to what was going on. We shared information in those weekly emails, and I think what they did for us more so is that if something had turned in, we had our cooperators poised and paying attention every week to what we were talking about. Finally, community events. We saw, starting in May, when the weather forecast came out, we saw preparedness events popping up unplanned to talk about wildfire danger. And so I would say from June to October, we saw probably a half a dozen to 10 preparedness events, many of them geared specifically toward fire season. And then I would just end by mentioning that we are in the middle of updating our community wildfire protection plan. It was last updated in the summer of 2020, just a few weeks before the Holiday Farm fire. And so lots of lessons learned. We've had that project underway for the entirety of 2025, and we'll be bringing that plan to you in 26 for approval. I mention it today with regard to wildfire season because we did have a relatively quiet season. A lot of those stakeholders that we rely on for that wildfire planning weren't as tied up. So we got a lot more done this summer than I think we expected. So lessons in motion. I mentioned that we had didn't see the need for a cooperators call, but adopted a weekly communication as a result of the ice storm and cumulative events. One of the things that we've determined, because Lane County likes to have their events on the weekend, is that email is not always an adequate way to communicate. So we're in the process of giving people an option to give us their phone number as well, so that if we're sending messages, immediate messages for meetings or activation, if we're sending it to someone that doesn't ordinarily check their email on the weekends or after hours, that we've got an additional device or platform by which to notify them. We implemented Genesis, our new evacuation software, this summer. Maybe the biggest output from that is that we redrew all of the evacuation zones for all of Lane County, including the urban area. This fire season did give us time to utilize the Genesis system. And as you'll recall from talking to you about this before, it is an evacuation system that talks to our alert system. And so that went well. We're in the process of training folks and developing resources so that we can develop a bench of people at every dispatch center and within different agencies to understand and utilize that system. And then finally, promoting operational readiness and coordination. I mentioned that a little bit already, just in terms of events that we saw throughout the season, in addition to outreach events, preparedness events, and requests for presentation. Okay, next we'll go into the winter weather briefing. These two images sort of say it all. We are expecting increased precipitation and increased temperatures this season. You can see from the outlooks that we're expecting above average rain, and above average in terms of temperature, commonly referred to as La Nina. The ENSO cycle, which is the winter weather cycle, is in a La Nina state, and it means just what the previous slide told you. It magnifies weather conditions. We're going to see a little warmer temperatures, a little increased rain, which tends to bring snow to the Pacific Northwest. The most impact that we're expected to see is this fall, and then just early in the year. The Weather Service predicts that we will return to a neutral ENSO state by early February. So while we may see snow and increased precipitation, it is expected to be short-lived. I wanted to remind you that last winter was a La Nina season, and it was a watch. We're currently in a La Nina advisory, and the distinction between those two is that a watch, as we experienced last year, means that the conditions are such that we expect a La Nina. An advisory means that we're already seeing those indicators and that behavior in the weather. Which brings us to our next slide. The most common way that we see this manifest itself during the winter is in the form of atmospheric rivers. Atmospheric rivers are large, narrow channels of precipitation that occur and result in increased rain and snowfall. The most famous, the one you're most familiar with, is the Pineapple Express. It brings precipitation from Hawaii to the Pacific Northwest, can dump as much as 5 inches in one day in extreme conditions. And so we do expect to see atmospheric rivers. They occur at all times, more dramatically during a La Nina. And so next we'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing to lean into winter. We've got some activities going on around mass care. Our Human Services Division is leaning into their partnership with St. Vincent de Paul, understanding how we prepare our unhoused and most vulnerable for winter. We have been hosting a series of seminars and exercises in the Emergency Operations Center, just getting people ready, reacquainted, acquainted if they haven't worked there before. And speaking of the Emergency Operations Center, the red, white, and blue team is what we refer to as the county staff that is not emergency management that shows up to help us activate. A reminder that the emergency management staff is 3, and we rely on staff from other departments during an activation to help man the operations. And so the red, white, and blue team refers to a little over 100 employees that are outside of emergency management that we're working with to develop a staff so that we can activate. Well, as I mentioned, we have ongoing development around alerting and evacuation. The reasons for evacuating changes, but we'll continue to build that system as we go into the winter. Drawdowns and dam monitoring are a common part of winter weather having to do with the fisheries, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. We're in the course of getting ready to issue a request for proposals on a countywide debris management contract. That certainly lends itself to winter weather. This contract would be one that the county enters into and that every jurisdiction in the county could piggyback on should the need arise. I talked to Public Works today. They are have secured all of their contracts for winter. They're preparing equipment and staff. We're just seeing staff and community organizations across the community leaning in and preparing for winter. And then finally, we'll just be doing winter weather and monitoring. You know, you can have a 90-day outlook, a 30-day outlook, but it really comes down to the next 7 or 14 days. So how we manage that, monitor that, and maintain coordination and communication with the cooperators when we see something on the forecast. And then let's just talk a little bit about personal and agency preparedness. Aside from our staff and our operational staff and our emergency operations center, we really encourage staff to get in prepared so that they're prepared at home to ensure their ability to respond at work. We had a big preparedness campaign earlier this fall, piggybacked on the Federal Preparedness Month. We ran it for 6 months and just had general suggestions. We participated in outreach and education fairs. We were asked to make about 10 presentations to different agencies and advocacy groups throughout the county about preparedness. And then again, as I mentioned, we're engaged in training and exercise for first responders and the Emergency Operations Center. And that concludes my presentation on closing out wildfire season and leaning into the winter season. Thank you.
Well done, Tiffany. Thank you very much. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Not so much this year as we had in previous years, but it seems to me like with our ice storm and the Holiday Farm Fire, we're at least getting the notion that preparedness is proper. So good on us for doing that, and good on you for your team. Your team of 3. You guys are very busy, so thank you. Yeah. Any comments or questions from the board? Yes, Commissioner Strieger.
Thank you. On the mass care side, given our ongoing conversations and this morning discussion about seeking to close the funding gap for shelter beds, some of the shelter beds that are at risk are our extreme weather shelter beds. Can you talk about the nexus between your work and that shortfall?
At this time of year, I fold in closely with the Severe Weather Collaborative and our Human Services Division partners just to understand where I can support and be the liaison between whatever resources might be available.
Is there, and I don't know if I see Steve Adams in the back of the room, if any part of our advocacy with the state is bringing in the emergency and disaster response obligations that we have to fulfill on behalf of the state, and how the shortage in shelter funding beds makes it harder for us to do the work they're asking us to do on that side.
Indeed, Chair, Commissioner, obviously the emergency shelter beds and the severe weather shelter beds are a goodly portion of the beds that are on the bubble. And so we certainly know that we've lost 60 beds thus far, in addition to about 30 FTE, and there's another tranche of beds that are potentially on the bubble if we're not able to secure additional funding. I think that our partners, I think at St. Vincent de Paul's, have been thinking about how best to deploy the resources that they have, and I think they've been doing some scenario planning just in terms of, given one set of resources, these are the kinds of, they would have one configuration of EGAN beds available during deployments, and given another level of resource, they could deploy more. But I think the net sum of this would be that a reduction, or at least if we're not able to secure those funds, then we were going to go into cold nights without sufficient beds. And if we have a prolonged ice event, as we did 2 winters ago, that could be very challenging for us. And that is absolutely the worst case scenario.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And I'm glad you're at the table right now, Steve, because we can talk about that just a little bit more. But first, to you, wow. When I grow up, I want your job, because I love the work that you do. I love the way you present it, and I love, in particular, what you call the communicator. Let's see. Cooperator
Operators.
report, excuse me. The weekly wildfire watch, and I'm looking back as recently as October 10th, where you talk about incident activity, talk about the upcoming weather. What that helped me personally to do, and I think it helped every one of us to do, is when people ask us what is going on with wildfires in Lane County, I don't have to make stuff up, I don't have to make a phone call. You provided it every single Friday, and bright and early, to the point that it's very easy for me to respond authoritatively on what is exactly going on and what people can expect. And I think you've done a superb job of bringing what is a river of work to a real focal point that we can use as a Board of County Commissioners. We can't control the weather. There's nothing we can do, ever. We can only control how we respond and how we're able to respond and how we can predict to the best of our ability what may happen. That's exactly what you're doing. And this, the most recent one last Friday was, what you said was, this is our final weekly wildfire watch. I loved reading those words because we're through the season at this point in time. It allows me to give a little bit of finality to the people who have been worried all summer long. Because while we didn't have any great smoke incursions, is that the right word, this year, people remember it, because you can't forget the taste of the smoke, you know, and so consequently your work is watched by a lot of people, sometimes through my eyes and my ears, but you're doing a superb job of communicating in a way that I've never seen us do before. And I will say this, that back in the winter of 2013, it wasn't even winter yet, it was about this time of the year where we got together over in Health and Human Services under the direction of Steve Manella. And we talked about what are we going to do this winter for the emergency situation in the weather. Look at how far we've come in the years since then, where we're talking about, we're trying to predict as well as we can the shortfall that we're going to have in order for us to bolster the efforts that we can put forward. Because of the work that you're doing, because of the foreseeing and the gathering of history, it enables us, including Steve Adams, to predict what we need to ask other people for to help us to provide. So bravo. I'd like to stand up and give you an applaud for the work that you do. And really, I wish you would keep writing at least something every Friday, because I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, good, thank you.
I'd say one last thing.
Please.
When I appeared before you in the spring, we introduced the Help OK sign. And Commissioner Trieger, aptly so, said, great idea, but how are you going to get them out to the public? And so that was part of our campaign this fall. We've reached out to our cooperators to see who would be willing to host the signs on a public counter. And put themselves on a list that we could then turn around and announce to the public. I'm delighted to say that we found 45 partners throughout the county, from the coast to Cresswell to Coburg. There wasn't an area that we didn't. Libraries, post offices, public counters of local governmental agencies, and we distributed 13,000 signs across those 45 locations. And probably some didn't get distributed, right? But I feel comfortable giving you that number because in addition to those 45 people, we had homeowners associations and nonprofits, and people step forward and ask for more signs. So while there still may be some sitting on counters, we distributed some more over there. Thank you for asking the question. It really got us thinking about how to make that more effective. And that's a program that won't go away. It's a plate spinning now. People are familiar with it. And so I wanted to follow up and let you know.
Great, thank you.
Great, well, it's certainly become a talking point around the staff when they have those in their windows and they flip them, occasionally going the other way. You okay? Everybody's good. So that was a very good and workable plan. Anything else from the board? If not, Ms.
Chair.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Farr.
For Steve, we talked a little bit about the ice storm of 2 years ago and what would happen if we had such an event. Currently, where we're sitting is if such an event happened with the funding as projected, we would be devastated in ways that we couldn't even imagine at this point in time. What can we do about it? I mean, and this is an adjunct to your presentation today.
Chair, Commissioner, it's a challenge. So we need resources to be able to deploy, deploy fixed assets. Shelter. We need real fixed supplies to be able to ensure that people have access to be able to get in out of the cold. You need materials, for which the volunteers to work. So obviously our shelter, our cold weather shelter depends heavily on volunteers. And I think, certainly lessons learned from the ice storm from a couple of years ago have already kind of rolled in thoughts around how can we use our transportation resources to get volunteers to places? How can we better communicate with the OCs as they stand up? How can we ensure that we're getting food into those things? But much of what we did on the basis of our lessons learned from 2 years ago was predicated on a functional set of shelter beds. And that's the piece that's more challenging at the moment with less beds available to us. And that, we're coping with, as the county administrator noted this morning, a reduction in funds available to us at the federal level, at the state level, and it rolls right down to here. So what can we do? I think, certainly, local philanthropy is important. People willing to step forward and try to write checks, as we've seen happening at Food for Lane County, as we've seen the SNAP issues. But I think there's a reality that there's not enough local philanthropy here, maybe, to cover the gaps, but we have to do what we can. I think these are all challenges that we're really struggling with at the staff level to think about how can we secure sufficient resources to be able to meet all of these needs. And it's a rough time. It really and truly is.
And finding locations is not going to be an easy prospect, but potentially stockpiling supplies like blankets, tarpaulins, extra stocks, things like that. That may be something that we can encourage our nonprofits to do, as well as some of our private partners. So I think what you're doing, what I've heard that you're doing this week is stepping forward to enlist people outside of the regular circles of philanthropy and getting more people focused on the work ahead of us. And the work has never been more challenging. So thank you, Steve.
People willing, might I add that we encircle our people of faith in that circle. I mean, I can think of Dan Bryant, Rabbi Ruhi, her circle of friends and cohorts, and I can also think of Steve Buss and One Hope and his 100 pastors. It's time for people of faith to step up and do as they profess, I think, is the challenge that I see as a person of faith, and I'm challenging my other people of faith too, that this may be a chance for us to shine in this winter. So hopefully we won't have that, but if we do, that's what I'm hoping for. So. Indeed. All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all your great time and effort. Tiffany did a great job. Continue doing it. We're proud of you. Thank you very much. We do have our last couple of items, our commissioner's business, our announcements, and our comments and remonstrance or committee reports. I do think we're on a little time deadline. We have an executive session that's an hour long that we need to get to. So if we have some quick announcements or input from the board, anything? Vice Chair.
Yes, real quick. I see Mr. Adams is leaving. I mentioned it earlier, but he put on a great rural housing infrastructure incubator, all the things last Wednesday and Thursday that Commissioner Buck and I attended 2 days and were a panelist one day. And that was a great event. I appreciate the staff and all the hard work that went into that, Mr. Adams. Second, I will, after hearing these last couple things and thinking about it, I will join Commissioner Farr and donating $5,000 out of my discretionary budget to Egan Warming Centers. I think it's a good thing we have that money so we can be quick and nimble when these kind of things arise, and we can help keep people warm this winter. So thanks for bringing that up and always being a champion for that, Commissioner Farr. Yep.
All right. Any future board assignments that we have on our docket? All right, I guess there's no review of those, and there's any other business for the good of the order? If not, I need to read us into an executive session, which will start at 3:05. We'll take about 6 minutes to get up to the Board of County Commissioners conference room. Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. This session is to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection and is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purpose listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or otherwise record an executive session, and verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. We will return to public session on Tuesday, November 18th, 2025 at 9 a.m. right here in Harris Hall. This meeting of the regular Board of County Commissioners is adjourned.